Hello, it's Paul Green here from the business community, doing another one of our regular Spotlight on interviews, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Eleanor Lester of Shrewd PR. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Paul. Lovely to see you today.
And you. Oh, let me just turn my email so that's not bleeping in the background. Yes, what we're going to do today is just find a little bit more about you and your business, how you came to be where you're at today. But initially, just want to introduce yourself and let people know who you are and what you do.
Yes, good morning. I'm Eleanor Lester from Shrewd PR. I'm a PR and marketing consultant, and I help businesses to manage their reputation both in the media and through all the communications that they put out.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to find a little bit about, can't even speak today. I'm going to find a little bit more about your business. So you've been in the PR industry for a number of years. I'm not going to ask how many years. That's a little bit like asking a lady how old she is. So unless you want to share that, we can forego that. So how did you end up where you are today, Ellen? What was your business journey to get to Shrewd PR?
Okay, well, I actually started out as a receptionist for a London-based PR agency. I'd left university and PR and marketing wasn't really on the horizon. I thought I was going to go and be a buyer for Phoenix, and that didn't work out. And I had my eyes opened as to all sorts of other work opportunities. And in chatting to all sorts of people, it became apparent that I probably had good communication skills that could be used in a PR and marketing sphere. So I started to put some feelers out and apply for your very basic junior account roles. And in common with a lot of youngsters today, got rejection after rejection, primarily because I didn't have any experience. And so I came across an advert in PR Week for a receptionist at a London agency. I got an interview, and during the interview, I basically said to the MD, look, I see this as a foot in the door. What I really, really want to do is actually get onto the account side. And I don't know whether it was the fact that she saw a kindred spirit or what, but I got the job, and that's how I started. And I started as a receptionist and then worked my way up to working on some of the account side. So doing all the very basic menial tasks like clipping the coverage and putting together the clippings booklets for the clients on a monthly basis. And then on the back of that, I got an opportunity to work on one of the computer games clients that we were working with and started to place regional competitions in the days where you had a plethora of regional newspapers and things like that that were always looking for space to fill. So that's basically how I got started.
Okay. So traditional PR, I guess, was magazines and newspapers and trade journals and things like that. With the advent of social media over the last decade, I guess it's really come into its own. What changes have you seen in terms of how you approach PR for your clients now?
I think there's been a massive change. PR is much more readily available to everybody, and I think the important thing for everybody to remember is that because it's about reputation and it's about managing your reputation, it pervades every single communication that you put out. So you're right, we need to be careful and considered in our approach to the use of social media, and that could be what we put out on our LinkedIn pages, but also on what we're putting out through our blogs and everything. And there are so many more platforms. There's a term that everybody is now sort of citizen journalist. And I think to an extent that is right. These platforms give us the ability to get our messages out there to our potential publics. But it's also more important than ever, I think, also to build that relationship with your audience, but also with those particular channels. And I think the thing that struck me when I was sort of starting out and when we came to set up Shrewd PR was that there were businesses out there who were wanting to communicate, but just didn't know how to go about doing it. And they were looking for a holistic approach. So they're wanting to make sure that their marketing messages dovetailed with their PR, and so we had a whole sort of organic and a big, I guess, an overall picture that all our marketing and all our PR and all our communication was on the right platform, but also talking about the right the right consistency. And I think that is the important thing. And I think that is where the industry has changed considerably, is the fact that with all these opportunities now, we can be much more consistent in our approach to putting out our messages using all these platforms.
And in terms of ranking, like, TV, radio, traditional press, social media, which would you say are the most important outlets from a PR perspective?
I think it depends on what you are. I think it depends on what messages that you're trying to get out. I mean, in terms of working with social media, that is a very good way of actually building a rapport with your community. So if you, and you can be quite niche in doing that. If you have got a story that you want to get out to, say, a wider audience, then something like the broadcast media and the BBC can be quite useful. I mean, I think also if we look at the way in which the pandemic has potentially affected all our communication, the opportunity, certainly within local BBC radio, for local businesses to shine and really put themselves out there and showing how they are working within their community to help and support, have been tremendous. And I think it's difficult to say which one actually necessarily leads over the other. I think it depends on who you are and what your target audience potentially is. But I would certainly say that if you are starting out, then working within the social media arena and working with bloggers and influencers can be quite a cost-effective and quite an easy way to start to build that relationship and to get the word out there. And I think also, because everybody is on social media all the time, it's easy for us to interact. So as a business, we can follow people and we can then interact in that way. And people are much more accessible, whereas working with a traditional journalist can be more challenging to get hold of. So you have to potentially get through a switchboard or an email first, whereas if you're approaching a company direct through social media, you have the opportunity to send them a message and tell them a little bit about yourself from there.
Do you find you have to be more responsive more quickly now with social media? Because I guess things can go quite downhill quite fast. You hear these stories. I think it was Burger King the other week that made a mistake of they got a campaign to try and raise women's profile in business, but they started off as a single sort of tweet with something about a woman's place in the kitchen. Now, in isolation, that is a very damning thing. Actually, the campaign, if people have followed it, was very positive about women, but they obviously got slated for stuff like that. So I guess you have to really respond quite quickly and be careful what you put on social media.
You do, and I think actually, but if you're approaching any person within the media, you have to be really careful. You have to set your goals, and I mean, don't ever treat anything as being off the record. I think it doesn't, and certainly Burger King did get slated, and I think rightly so in an extent, in the fact that I think they also launched it on International Women's Day as well.
It was, yeah. Yeah.
So I think perhaps from a PR perspective, they might possibly have taken a step back and thought, actually, how could this play out? And I think you're right that you do have to be reactive, but similarly, I mean, you can have situations where the traditional media are on you and are after you very, very quickly for something, and it is about being careful and considered, I think, because what we're looking to do is to try and promote and establish our reputations and our credibility, and moving on from there. So yes, I think you do have to be quite careful and considered.
I think building on that, you mentioned International Women's Day, that there's obviously pretty much a day for everything now. There's probably a day for baked beans, who knows? So I guess, what's your thought on that? Because it's quite easy, I guess, to jump on a bandwagon, if you like, of something that's happening on that day. How do you get that balance, and how do you be sincere about that?
I think it's important to work out whether it actually fits within your brand values and your key messaging. There's a term that we that we call sort of newsjacking. And it's a situation whereby something happens within the media, and then you, as a smaller local business, try and put a positive spin on it, or try and use it to your advantage. And actually, some examples of that where it has worked quite well are local travel agents, for example, being able to put their thoughts and their advice related to the latest travel restrictions and things. So I think there are definitely opportunities there, but you need to carefully consider them so that you can actually work out how you can utilize them to your benefits. And I think also most journalists also want the sort of so what type factor, and in that you need to be really quite considered, and you need to be able to be adaptable, but also be able to show how you are particularly solving a problem of their particular audience. And I think, as I said earlier, with regards to sort of travel, everybody is itching to move about and actually go and see something other than the same four walls that they have been doing. And so there are opportunities from there.
Okay. So what gets you out of bed in the morning, Eleanor? What's your why? What drives you each day to fight the good fight, as it were?
I think I've been very fortunate. I have a really lovely group of clients to work with. No 2 days are ever the same, and they all have their own challenges. But I think it's that, and I think that it's also the fact that because I take a holistic approach, I'm involved with the marketing, the sort of full remit of what these businesses do. And so we look at what our next launches might be, what our next challenges might be. And I love a challenge, but also I really enjoy actually speaking to journalists and actually getting coverage and seeing my clients' names up in lights. And that could be on a website, it could be working with an influencer. And I still get a real thrill out of doing that. And I've as you hinted earlier, I've been doing it for quite a while, and I still love it, and I still like to see that your client type in names, and also actually when it really starts to make a difference for clients, where they start to see either their phone starting to ring or their order numbers going up and everything like that. And whilst you can't necessarily directly attribute it to PR, the fact that actually you've got coverage that is increasing their brand awareness and ensuring their credibility all helps, so that when their customers are in their particular sort of buying challenge, that they're there. So I think that's probably what I'd say to that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking back, was in the electronics industry. I remember we used to measure our coverage by column inches or something like that. Was the measure about, how many column inches we got that week in the trade press or whatever.
Absolutely. And then you times it by 3 at the end, because PR was perceived to be 3 times more value than the advertising. Right. And actually, and there's a little nugget of truth in that, in the fact that if you think that advertising is something you pay for, whereas PR is something that you earn, and if you and based on the fact that in order to get a piece of coverage in whatever sphere we're talking about, you have to have sold in your story to a journalist. They have to have considered that what you're telling them is relevant to their audience, and therefore they want to write about it. And so that's not an easy thing to do, which is why I guess the industry thought that was how you did it. And certainly one of the things I did when I started out was call up, get the AVEs, and do that for the clippings booklets. I think happily we've moved on to look at sort of key messaging and opportunities and things like that. But PR is still something that is quite a challenge to definitely be able to measure.
Does it have more impact with a journalist or someone receiving a story if it's coming from a PR professional like you? Because presumably you've got contacts, and presumably you've built an amount of trust over the years. If they see something coming from Eleanor rather than Paul Green, they might read yours, bearing in mind the nature of your profession.
I definitely think working with a PR consultant can actually open doors for you, very definitely. And particularly since, any consultancy or agency will have a core of journalists that they work with, because what tends to happen is that you have a particular field of expertise. And within that, you have journalists that you go back to. So yes, you're right. Technically, it should be slightly easier. Having said that, a good story by itself will always out. I was listening to local radio this morning, and because of where we are within the year from COVID, they were revisiting the story of Captain Sir Tom Moore. And that story started by his daughter contacting his local radio station. And on the back of that, it spiraled out. So there is an example of, you don't necessarily have to be with a PR company, but it can certainly help. And certainly in my experience, most clients will say that they find it easier to get those opportunities by working with a consultant or an agency.
Okay. And in terms of your client base, are there any particular clients that you prefer to work with? Is there any type of industry sector that you're looking to specialise in? Who are you looking to do business with on the whole, Eleanor?
I'm on the basis that every company, or at least my passion and my viewpoint is that every company needs PR and marketing. I will work with SME and micro businesses, and I don't have a particular niche. The one area that I've never worked in is sort of technology, but I've worked with franchise brands. I've worked with women's lifestyle. I've worked with FMCG. Realistically, the right client for me is somebody who understands that they could do with some PR and marketing help. Either they have a team and they need some outside expertise, or they've tried it, they found that actually it takes an awful lot of time and they want to outsource it. And they're prepared to work with a company that can come and put together a holistic approach to the whole marketing activity and actually make sure that what they're communicating is relevant to all their different target audiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess there's other PR agencies out there, obviously not as good as you, Eleanor, but what would you say makes you different from your competitors?
I think the difference is that we take a holistic approach. We're aware that PR pervades every single piece of communication. So it's not just about working with the media, and it's not just about potentially taking on somebody's social media. It's actually looking at the whole communication package within that business. And that could be looking at what email marketing they're doing. It could be looking at the messages they're putting out through direct marketing. It could be as simple as listening to how their team are actually interacting with their customers. I mean, after all, PR is all about this this thing called reputation. It's about the actions that we put out, and it helps us to develop our credibility. And if our interactions with our customers aren't right, then it doesn't matter how good all the other bits of PR around it are. People don't buy into you and don't actually believe that you are somebody that they want to be involved with. So I think it's our holistic approach to communication in general.
Okay. So we're still in the midst of a pandemic, hopefully with some light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. And I guess that's been the biggest challenge for most at this time. But outside of that, over your sort of business journey, what would you say the biggest challenge or challenges are that you've faced and that you've seen, had to overcome?
I think there are a couple of things. I think in common with most small businesses, it's finding your clients and making sure that you've got that lead generation coming in. And that's where things such as BuzzCom and networking have been so useful. But I think the other thing is actually being aware of all the new types of PR on the horizon and being able to adapt to that. When there was when blogs and things like that started to become apparent, there was a shift to clients starting to use them. So it was honing your skills, and I think those are the big challenges. It's what will be the next big thing, and it's how can you see what's coming, look at how it could be used from a client perspective, and help to move it forward. I remember years and years ago having a conversation with a client just as Twitter started to come on board, and we were talking about how that might possibly work for them. And we at that stage decided that we were going to just sort of watch and see what was happening. But very quickly we decided that actually that we could use it to put out the odd little tip here and there, and potentially direct people to certain things. So I think the challenge is really to keep up with what is a very fast moving and fast evolving scenario, really.
Yes, so some social media platforms come and go. Others are sort of seem to be here for the longer duration. I guess the latest contender on the block, which I guess sort of fits into social media, is Clubhouse. I don't know whether you've been involved with that.
No, unfortunately, I don't have Apple. But yeah, I think from what I understand, it's a platform to actually have a conversation and listen in particular, I think as well, isn't it, from everything I sort of pick up?
Yes, it's quite interesting because really it's taking what I consider like an old format, which is like a traditional radio interview show with a phone in, and they've made a platform out of it because it is purely all audio. You can go to their. I'm Android as well, so I'm not yet there. I'll join in when they come and let the Android people play.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that. So you can sort of attend the broadcast. You can put your virtual hand up and actually be involved in a conversation. I think what people like about it is they're getting very, very close to, influencers you touched. I think Elon Musk was on there and got, probably the highest amount of attendees. But, that person hosting it can invite you into the broadcast. So it's a very good way, if I guess you leverage it, of getting your brand out there, of raising your profile and stuff like that. So it is an interesting platform. I think Twitter and Facebook are also working on their own versions of that now because they've seen the take up has been quite massive.
Yeah, and I think this is it, isn't it? It's the everybody sees what the next sort of hot thing is. I think the only I think the important thing actually for all of these elements is to make sure that whatever you're doing is sustainable, and also to sort of find out where your tribe, I know that's a fairly sort of marketing speak type term, but sort of try and find out where all these people hang out, and everything, because it's and then make sure that you can resource it. And certainly from small businesses, if you spread yourself too thin, then you end up sort of falling between a rock and a hard place. So it's good. But if you're in the opportunity of being able to have that direct contact with people and actually listening to things, I guess it sounds to me as though it's a little bit like the how webinars used to be when they first started out, and you used to get all the sort of brand ambassadors talking about how they got started, and you could leave your sort of comments in the chat. So, and actually, given how audio is at the moment and how podcasts and things have all sort of taken off, I think it doesn't surprise me that it is gaining leverage.
And I think they did a great PR job keeping on track, that they just stuck it on Apple. So they already made a scarcity in as much as, whatever the percentage is, we're going to miss out. They also sort of said it was by invitation only. So, there's loads of stuff on other social media platforms saying, I've got an invite, do you want one type thing. So from that point of view, I think they did a great job of, creating that FOMO, fear of missing out, wanting to be there. So, hats off to whoever the inventors were. It is something that, I'm not going to go out and buy an Apple phone just to get access to it, as I know some people have, but I will probably get involved and have a little look at it from my point of view and just sort of see if it's going to add any value to what I do.
I think this is it. And it's the same. It's the same that for every new challenge. Every new challenge as it comes on board, you have to weigh up what it is and what it's doing, and absolutely pick up on the things that are beneficial and helpful.
Okay, so you've kindly agreed to share some of your knowledge. So I'm going to put you in solo mode now, if I can find the right button, and just hand over to you. I wasn't professional enough to ask what you're going to talk about, but I trust you implicitly. So I'll let you sort of introduce your topic. And yes, the floor is yours, Eleanor.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk today and share some top tips for PR. The first thing to remember is that PR is about reputation. It's about the result of what you say, what you do, and what others say about you. And it's something that can't be bought, it has to be earned. PR and doing PR will help to build the credibility for your business. It helps you to develop a positive image and helps you to build and cement relationships with your customers. And it can also help you to drive your sales. So when you come to put your PR plan together, the first thing you need to do is have some goals. And it's quite likely that your PR goals will mirror your marketing goals. So, for example, if you're looking to expand your business, you might be wanting to try and gain some new clients. You might be launching a new product or service that is aimed at a particular type of audience. So it could be working women, it could be parents, it could be accountants. But they will all have particular types of media that they will follow and be involved with. And what your challenge from a PR perspective is to get your story out to the communication channels that these people read. So it could be an online blog, it could be a local newspaper, it could be an influencer. And what you need to do when you put your plan together is to start to look at your target list of publications, and then work your way through putting together a list of journalists that you might want to go and talk to. And having got those sort of core basics together, your next challenge is, of course, to put your story together. And in terms of doing that, what you need to work on is putting together a press release. Now, your press release needs to have 5 key things. And we call these in the industry the 5 W's. That's who, what, where, when, and why. And ideally, you need to be able to answer those 5 W's in your first paragraph. And that really is your statement. It's your intent. It's putting out to a journalist what your story is in a nutshell. The other important thing is to make sure that your press release has the so what factor. And that is the bit that you will ultimately use for leverage with the journalist, and actually ultimately goes to getting you that coverage. And when you think about it and drill down into it quite deeply, what you're looking for is the reason why your product or service, the problem it solves, how you're going to help, and what you can offer to their particular audience. And then in terms of following up your story, so you've sent your press release out, and you then need to make sure that you call to follow up, and call in your story and see how that can then develop. Additionally, having the opportunity to offer somebody for spokespersons or good images can also really help to go to support your story and to help you get that coverage. And the other thing to remember also is that when it comes to PR is about a relationship. And as you get to know the journalist or the influencer or the social media platform that you're working with, you will be able to provide them with information about what you're doing. And this will ultimately also potentially lead to further story opportunities for you. So just because you send out one press release to a journalist doesn't necessarily mean that you will only ever get one piece of coverage. It's more likely that you can start to build a relationship with the journalist and actually get more exposure for your brand. When you are speaking to a journalist, make sure that you treat everything as being actually on the record, and don't ever put anything in an email or in a press release that you really wouldn't be prepared to stand by in print. I know that sounds quite simple, but it's quite an important thing. So if in doubt, don't. The other thing I would also say is that if you're unsure about your story, then consider consulting an expert, because they're likely to have additional contacts or insider contacts for particular magazines and things like that. And because they're working with these journalists on a regular basis, they will actually be able to open the door for you where you may not. And finally, remember that PR is not a quick fix for your business. It's a strategic process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its publics.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anna. That was really useful stuff. You got a little bit of a fan. I'll just share the comment just to show you that it works. So Neil attended one of your workshops and really enjoyed it. So fan stalker. I don't know how you want to take it, but nice that you're tuning in, Neil. Sorry to be rude about you. So the final thing that I ask people is, you know, if you were going to give one top tip for your typical business owner out there, whether it's a PR related one or just you as a business owner yourself, what would that tip be? What would your piece of advice be to anyone listening?
I think I was thinking about this actually. Don't be afraid to take a risk. And I know as a PR I should potentially be sort of risk averse, but actually in many, certainly for me personally, I would not have started my business if I hadn't been prepared to take a risk and actually take that first step into potential self-employment and everything. And I think particularly now, there are going to be all sorts of opportunities that are going to come our way that we never ever considered. So I definitely think the advice is don't be afraid to take that risk, because you just never know where it's going to lead. And I think certainly in the years that I've been in business, I've never looked back. Yes, it's been a roller coaster, but then I think most small businesses is. But definitely don't be afraid to take a risk.
No, I think that's true. I think most people, when they step into doing their business, that's the first risk, isn't it? I guess they're taking of that uncertainty. But yeah, you know, I would add to that. Yes, take risks. I've done the same thing. It is a roller coaster. I think if you can put like a support network around you as well, you know, the expression ear to bend, shoulder to cry on. You know, you can pay for these services. You can pay for coaches and business advisors and stuff like that. But I think you can also find people that are willing to do it. Just as a sounding board over a cup of coffee or a virtual cup of coffee nowadays. So yeah, no, absolutely great advice. So thank you for today, Eleanor. Your ordeal is over now. So thanks for giving up your time to have this chat. I'm going to end the broadcast there.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Paul. Thank you.